October 1942, high above Tunisia, a formation of P-38 P-38 Lightnings escorted B-17 bombers at 25,000 feet when German Bf-109Gs dropped out of the sun. The American pilots pushed their throttles forward. But something was wrong. The twin Allison V-1710 engines roared, yet the P-38s struggled to climb, dragging through the sky as if chained to anchors, while the Messerschmitts soared like homesick angels. Within moments, the Germans had altitude, position, and advantage. An execution waiting to happen. It wasn't an isolated incident. Across North Africa and Europe, P-38 pilots complained through late 1942 and early 1943 that their aircraft couldn't breathe above 20,000 feet. On paper, the Lightning was unbeatable. Twin engines, heavy armament, long range, but in practice, it gasped for power where it mattered most. The Army Air Forces knew they had a problem. German fighters, the Bf-109G and FW-120A, were outclimbing the Lightning, threatening bombers at altitudes the Americans couldn't defend. The kind who fixed things with whatever was lying around. When pilots returned from high-altitude missions complaining of power loss above 22,000 feet, he dug into the problem. On the ground, every test checked out. Boost pressure was fine, superchargers functional, intercoolers operational. But those specs were written for mild California conditions, not 110-degree North African heat. He studied the Lightning's turbo supercharger system, a marvel that used exhaust gases to compress incoming air, which was then cooled by intercoolers before reaching the engine. But in the desert, the cooling air was scorching hot. The compressed air entering the engine was still too warm and thin, robbing power. Then he spotted something no one else had. The intercooler's exit doors were controlled by thermostatic valves, designed to maintain a safe, moderate temperature range. But those safe settings were strangling the engines in combat. The mechanic asked himself, what if we just opened them all the way? He overrode the thermostatic controls, locking the doors wide open to flood the intercoolers with maximum air. Against the manual's warnings, he removed some internal baffles too. Lockheed and the Army Air Forces publicly credited combat experience for the discovery, a rare nod to the grease-stained ingenuity that made it happen. By 1944, over 4,000 Lightnings incorporated that principle, allowing P-38s to escort bombers at 30,000 feet across Europe and the Pacific. The Lightning was no longer a struggling climber. It was a predator. In North Africa, Captain John Weltman led his modified squadron on a bomber escort to Tunis. When German fighters dived from above, his P-38s climbed through them, widening the airflow. It was crude, risky, and brilliant. The first test came one February morning in 1943. A young lieutenant volunteered to fly the modified Lightning. At 15,000 feet, temperatures were lower than ever recorded. At 20,000, the engines still pulled strong. At 28,000, the aircraft was climbing like never before. Over the radio, the pilot laughed. "She climbs like a homesick angel." When he landed, crews swarmed the plane. The mechanic checked everything. No cracks, no warped metal, no thermal damage. Engineers were still drafting studies and airflow simulations, estimating an 8 to 12-month timeline for factory redesigns. The mechanic's version took 4 hours and a wrench. The results spoke for themselves. Climb rates up 15%, engine temperatures stable, reliability intact. In April 1943, modified P-38s intercepted German Ju-88 bombers over the Mediterranean, climbing 3,000 feet in 2 minutes, a feat previously impossible. In May, one Lightning pilot matched a Bf-109 in a vertical fight and shot it down at 31,000 feet. Between March and June, loss rates in high-altitude escort missions dropped 42%, the Luftwaffe noticed. Captured German pilots reported confusion. American fighters that once struggled at altitude were suddenly as fast as thunderbolts. The modification earned a nickname among crews, the White Lightning upgrade, both for the aircraft's silver skin and the moonshine kick it gave the engines. Mid-1943, Lockheed engineers examined a field-modified P-38. Americans couldn't horrified. Lockheed engineers at Burbank examined reports, but the P-38 had passed every test. On paper, everything worked. Yet in combat, pilots were dying. The solution wasn't going to come from a lab or wind tunnel. It was going to come from a mechanic, a man with grease under his fingernails and desperation in his eyes. His name is lost to history, but his work would change aerial warfare. This unnamed staff sergeant served in a P-38 T-8 squadron in Tunisia, 1943. Before the war, he'd been a car mechanic. They were horrified and impressed. The modifications violated countless safety standards, but the data didn't lie. A 12% power boost at 25,000 feet and no failures. To their credit, Lockheed listened. By August, the new P-38J rolled off the line with redesigned intercoolers inspired by the field fix, larger cores, freer airflow, smarter thermostats. The result? Nearly 200 more horsepower at altitude. The later P-38L improved it even further, with enlarged ducts and larger exit doors, climbing 30% faster than early versions, claiming Lockheed 3 kills without losing a single bomber. Weltman wrote, "Aircraft performed beyond expectations. Modification is combat critical." Similar stories echoed across theaters, from Tunisia to New Guinea. Major Thomas Lynch of the 39th Fighter Squadron wrote in his diary after a July 1943 mission, "The Lightning finally does what it was always supposed to do. We own the sky up here now." By late 1943, the numbers were undeniable. Kill ratios soared, bomber losses dropped by a third, and pilot morale transformed from frustration to confidence. One flyer said it best. 6 months ago, I saw Germans above me and thought, here we go again. Now I see them and think, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The mechanic who started it all never received a medal or citation. He returned home quietly, probably to a garage somewhere, fixing cars again, never knowing that his unauthorized tweak had reshaped air combat. Yet every P-38 pilot who made it home from 30,000 feet owed him their life. The lesson worked out. Within days, every aircraft in the squadron got the same treatment. The results were immediate. P-38s, once mauled over Tunisia, were now outclimbing their German counterparts. Their squadron commander knew the modification wasn't authorized, but in war, results mattered more than paperwork. He quietly reported the change up the chain, but official channels moved slowly. "Continue testing," came the reply. So the squadrons kept testing in combat. By March 1943, modified Lightnings were spreading across North Africa. Meanwhile, at Wright Field in Ohio, the engineers were still outlived the war. The fix inspired design philosophy in Lockheed's next generation. From the P-80 jet fighter onward, cooling systems prioritized real-world combat airflow, not just laboratory safety. It became a cornerstone of modern field engineering. That innovation often begins not in the boardroom, but on the flight line, in the hands of those who refuse to accept that good enough is good enough. The P-38 Lightning ended World War II with one of the most distinguished combat records in aviation history. Its twin booms became icons of American air power. But buried beneath that legacy lies the invisible signature of a single mechanic. A man who looked at an underperforming engine and decided to trust his instincts over instructions. He didn't just fix a plane. He changed the course of a war.